Yo, 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 yo. Paying homage to my brother Yovan Buha, man. Welcome back to the latest edition of Wos Speaks. I'm your host, Big Wos AKA Wosny Lambre. Thank you guys for being with us today, man. Been another crazy week. Um and this guy Donald Trump's been president for 10 freaking days or whatever it's been, and it's been just breakneck stuff happening with all of these executive orders. Um, of course he passes, and it's so funny because if we could rewind to the campaign, if you guys remember, there was all this fuss about Project 25, which is basically like this Heritage Foundation document, Heritage Foundation being a conservative think tank that the GOP takes a lot of their cues from. And they had their Project 25, basically like the second we get back in office, these are the things, ticking off the things they'd like to do. They know they can do. They want to try to push the limits on doing whatever. It was very instructive. And if you guys remember, Trump and them definitely went out of their way to sort of distance themselves from that document, right? It was like, yo, this Project 25 shit is not us. We have our own ideas about how we want to govern. If we get in next time, get that out of here. That was their whole thing during the campaign, because Democrats, I think, quite effectively were sort of tying that as a noose around their necks. Like, look at how unhinged this is. They want to defund everything. They want to blah, 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 whatever. So, and I think it's worth mentioning the tactics or the game plan for the Trump people. Like, if you read to some of these more access driven, well sourced publications like Politico and Axios and all of those places, Trump people have said the strategy, especially very early on, is to sort of quote unquote flood the zone with stuff. And what does that mean? That means just like throwing out so many things, whether they plan on seeing them through or not, so that the opposition has a hard time latching on to one thing or the other, right? And I think a good example of that is them putting it out there as part of their DEI ban. They're not going to recognize Black History Month, which, as a headline seems so insane and scandalous. Like, Black History Month is kind of just taken for granted. And if you just, if you scrolling on your phone, or you're scrolling through social, or you have New York Times push notifications or whatever, and that comes across your phone, you're like, damn, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is nuts, right? And so the idea again with the regime is to just keep pumping stuff out. Whether it ends up going through or not, you need to keep the opposition occupied, constantly keep them on their toes, so that it's like almost a game of whack-a-mole, where Trump is just throwing out, saying things or signing executive orders, or like just literally flooding the zone. And I think, especially with the first week, especially some of the more immigration focused stuff, I became a little bit nervous seeing all of this stuff get rolled out so quickly. And the reason why is because it felt like a departure from the first Trump term, where, shit like the immigration ban was just like the Muslim ban was just like, wait, you're banning travel from anybody, from like, how do you even define a Muslim country? Like, what if they were born there but they're atheists now? Like, are they taking tests to like, are we asking them when they get here, do you believe in, like, it was so weird and so broad and not targeted at all. And eventually, of course, immediately these laws get sued. Trump he took so many L's in the courts his first term. And so, I thought last week, with the way they were rolling out all of this immigration stuff, I was like, oh man, it's like these fools really spent 4 years coming up with a detailed game plan about how they're going to go about enacting their agenda. There's going to be stuff they try to get through the House and the Senate, but then, the stuff that they could just do via decree, AKA executive order, where with the wave of a pen, Trump can get something done. Like they are attacking that. And it felt really like nerve-wracking a bit. Then, part of the immigration order is like, oh, we're ending birthright citizenship, which is just like, unless you plan on just completely ever, like, we're just ripping up the Constitution and burning it. We don't need a Supreme Court. We don't need a Congress. We just have a king now. Like, unless you plan on doing that, like, this is DOA. This is dead on arrival. And so I think that was like the first like idea that like, all right, not all of this is some meticulously planned situation. So then fast forward to this week where they basically put out an executive order where we're basically doing a funding freeze across the federal government. And basically, we're exempting Social Security and Medicare. And by the way, not including Medicaid, which I think is where they got screwed up really quickly. And these are programs that like are running the gamut. And again, when I was like reading up on it, all of the people who paid really close attention to this was like, this is a fairly broadly written order. This isn't gonna pass muster. Like okay, so there's a couple of things. One, Congress during the Nixon administration passed a law that said if we negotiate spending appropriations, it passes both of our houses, the president signs it into law, like you're obligated to spend the money, right? Like, period. And so Trump is like challenging that notion where he's just like, oh, it's like all of this money that's already been allocated via the Congress, and their ability to appropriate these funds, and that's already been signed by our government. I'm the new president. I get to come in and be like, oh, I don't think such and such should get that. I don't think so. It's like illegal. So again, they put this shit out. Of course, there's this huge panic. Medicaid and a bunch of other stuff, but Medicaid specifically because of Obamacare, which I thought like at the time I was kind of annoyed that they did this. Or no, that's a lie. I wasn't annoyed, but what they call the mandate, the Medicaid mandate, where the federal government under Obamacare was like, look, here's a bunch of extra money that's federal money, federal government money. So the states, like, guys, it's free money. It's not coming out of your state coffers, so you don't even have to budget for it. And it's going to put more people under the Medicaid umbrella, which is basically free healthcare for some of our poorest citizens. And then, of course, because the Republicans were maniacs back then, they took the law to court. Supreme Court said you can't force them to take the money. The state has to opt in to taking this Medicaid money from the state, right? And bruh, a bunch of these red states were holdouts for no reason other than Obamacare bad because the black guy came up with it. No reason, literally free money. Like, you don't just say no to free money. So eventually, though, slowly but surely, guys, a bunch of red states just came to their senses like, dog, why am I not taking this Medicaid money, okay, and just getting my citizens health care? So slowly but surely, which, ends up working out, slowly but surely, hold on, oh, sorry. I'm getting bombarded with texts right now. Anyway, slowly but surely, a bunch of red states opt in. And so now those red states, and this is why they always try their hardest. This is why they always try their hardest to make sure citizens don't get what they call entitlements, because it's damn near impossible to claw these shits back. Once people get a government program that they like, the second somebody tries to touch it or affect it, they can't. And so they try their hardest too. That's why we can't get healthcare. They're like, bruh, these people are going to love it and we'll never be able to get rid of it, right? And so all of these red states now did the Medicaid expansion. So now fast forward to Trump, and they leave Medicaid out of the exemption for the funding freeze. And all of these states, both red and blue, the way by which they disperse the funds for Medicaid just gets frozen, and it's fucking chaos. And guess what? Like it or not, a lot of Trump voters are lower income people who depend on this program. So now everybody's getting screwed by this. And this is before we get into stuff like veterans, like assistance programs, like all kinds of programs that everybody needs. And look, it's not a partisan thing. It's like everybody needs and wants is getting affected. And guess what happens? They freaking back down. Trump and them back down. And again, this one, I'm not gonna lie, this one felt like it harkened back to the first term where so like every single thing they did was so sloppy and haphazardly done that they were just constantly getting crushed in the courts, right? And this one just felt similar to that. And so finally they relented. And Jerv, if you could pull that up for me, please. NBC News here. Trump administration rescinds order attempting to freeze federal aid spending. The Trump administration on Wednesday rescinded an order putting a widespread freeze on most federal grants and loans amid significant criticism, according to a White House memo, a source provided to NBC News. A senior administration official confirmed the recession Wednesday, which was ordered by the Office of Management and Budget. A federal district judge on Tuesday evening temporarily halted the initial order, which sparked chaos and confusion across Washington. Democrats, who aggressively pushed back against the order, celebrated the recession of the memo soon after it was reported on Wednesdays. Quote, Americans fought back and Donald Trump backed off, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York said in a statement. Though the Trump administration failed in its tactic, it's no secret that they will try to find another. And when they do, it will again be Senate Democrats there to call it out, fight back, and defend American families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we could take that off, Jerv. And why was this important? Like, look, y'all know my stance on Trump, the regime. I think it's bad for the country. I think it sucks that Kamala lost. I wish it wasn't so. I think the next 4 years are going to be trying times. I think there's plenty of ways these guys, Trump and his freaking oligarchs who now run our country, can hurt, working families and put working people in a bind. That's my stance. However, this is why I thought it was foolhardy during the campaign to paint this guy as the next Hitler, the next whatever dictator, the next freaking Pol Pot. Shouts to my son Noah Cole when I'm listening to that Blowback podcast right now about the Cambodian Vietnam War. To paint him as this outsized monster and not just the next administration was a mistake. Not only just because he had not only because he's already had a freaking term in office. So people are going to be like, wait a minute, Trump was already president. He didn't round people up and send them to death camps. He didn't he didn't behave as a dictator. In fact, he had a bunch of problems. People were thwarting his freaking efforts at every turn. So not only was it just wrong for that, it's just like you're just taking away from an affirmative messaging from your own sort of platform. Okay? And so Anyway, that's why I thought that was ineffective. So anyway, so now what we're seeing again, guys, like it's not to say that Trump is not going to be more effective than last time. It's just like people need to have an appreciation for the freaking sprawl of the government bureaucracy, for better and for worse. Uh it's so freaking huge, and the tentacles go out so far. Like a dude, even as determined as Trump is, cannot just simply rule via fiat and decree. And part of the reason why the courts will act as a check is because if they don't, they're opting out of their own power and influence. And for what? To hand it over to Donald Trump? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Whether you're a conservative judge or a liberal judge or a centrist judge or whatever you are, or your Congress, like the idea that these entrenched powers are going to lay down and just allow this dude to run over them doesn't make sense. That's not how people work. Nobody's just going to be like, this power and influence that I worked my whole life to achieve, here, Trump, just have it. The system is set up for these people to want to maintain and continue their own power and influence on the country. And so when, a freaking judge who's appointed by Saint Ronnie Reagan, okay, is like, bruh, this was like one of the easy, the birthright citizenship was like one of my easiest judgments ever. The Constitution is pretty clear on this. It's like, yeah, it's a conservative judge, and yeah, that's not favorable and whatever, but like, these people aren't going to just cede their own power and influence to Donald Trump. And I would say the same thing about the Supreme Court, who, look, I have no faith in these people, but again, they're self-interested in perpetuating their own legitimacy, into perpetuating their own need for existence. And so even they, as tilted and as they are towards the oligarchy and the business interests and the corporate interests, etc., the entrenched power of the country, even they are not it's not in their self-interest to just lay down and let this guy be the be all and be the new king of America. And so, look, we can take solace in the loss that Trump took as taken, and I think we can sort of forecast that there's going to be more of this coming down the pipe. But I thought this week was a lesson in, like, and again, Stephen Miller, all of these freaking ghouls in Trump's administration, like, these people would love nothing more than to strip the entire federal government bare and just privatize the whole thing. Which, by the way, privatization is a scam. I know people like, oh, businesses run more lean, but the government's not a business. Okay. Here's why. Let's take, for example, the freaking that crash that happened in DC. Unfortunate. American Airlines flight crashes into a freaking military helicopter. The idea that you would run air traffic control as a business, meaning make it as lean as possible, have as little people working on it as possible, as cheap as possible, and treat it like a business. You can't do that. You need to actually overdo it for the safety reason. Because, when you're selling purple leaf iced tea, okay, and something goes wrong because you cut a corner here, all right, maybe you miss out on some sales. Maybe you don't, your quarter wasn't as successful as the previous two. And while that may suck for you and your shareholders and stakeholders, it sucks, but we can get on from that. When you treat air traffic control like a business and try to run it as lean as possible, people fucking die, right? And so that's why when you hear these fucking idiots, these freaking ghoulish libertarian types, or just, free market absolutists, free market evangelicals talk about, oh, the government needs to be ran as a business, is nonsense, right? And look, that's not to say there isn't government bloat, that we couldn't benefit from trimming some fat. And there's a lot of fat I think one of the things y'all could look this up, like McKinsey has like billions of dollars or whatever it is, hundreds of millions of dollars to consult the freaking government. Like, there's no way that's passing an audit. Don't even get me started on the military. Like the freaking defense budget. If we truly audited that thing, and I know people who have been in the military, it's like, bro, there's so much waste in the military. And part of it is like, come on, why would we ever, like, our goal is to always go back and ask for more for our budget, not less. When we use less, there's no reason, like, it's crazy, the incentives, whatever. So I say that to say that that's not to say that there's absolutely no bloat in the government. And also, that's not to say, like, if you polled most Americans on this idea, it'd be like, yo, do you think the government is wasteful in its spending? Of course, everybody's gonna agree, and I think that's what Trump and them are banking on, right? Like people being like, yeah, the government's probably wasteful. We probably do need to cut some spending somewhere. But in practice, how does it work? Where are we doing it at? And in practice, you're going to be cutting things, goods and services that actually people like and benefit from. And not only just that, absolutely need, and it's essential to them. And I think they learned a nice, valuable lesson about the sprawl of the government and this idea that you would just come in via fiat and just start cutting shit and putting red lines through items, as if this is some mom and pop hardware store and not the biggest government in the history of mankind, you know. And make no mistake, I think a lot of people saw the sort of similarities, especially with Elon being so close to the administration. This idea that that's like Elon's greatest trait to a lot of his peers in the business community is that, he goes into Twitter, he fires like 80% of the staff, and people like, bro, the app's not going to be able to run. Like, you don't have enough employees, and him making it work, right? That's what he's done at a lot of companies. Just fire a bunch of people. That's his whole credo. It's like, most of these people are inessential. Fire their asses. We'll save so much money doing so. And yeah, man, that's what I think happened. I think Elon was very influential in them sort of, the Doge and the we're gonna trim the fat. We're gonna trim 2 trillion. All this fucking chatter in the campaign. All this cap, by the way. All this cap these people sort of fed the country as they were trying to court people for votes. I think this is in line with that. And the fact that this shit got smacked down is interesting. And then, just a couple of days ago, Trump came out and said, no budget of mine is going to touch entitlements. He's like, as idiot savant as Trump is, like, he's not a complete maniac. Like, he knows the second you stop, like, people on Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security, they start seeing cuts to their benefits, it's going to be an uproar. People will hit the fucking streets behind that shit. So he's already come out and said entitlements will not be touched. So, all of this shit the Republicans do about deficit hawkery and we need to trim the deficit and spending is out of control and blah, blah, blah. It's all cap. Every time these folks get in power, what happens? The deficit increases. They spend like sailors. They cut all kinds of revenue, AKA taxes. Like, it's the same. Like, bro, you just go down the line with Republican like each one. That's what they do. And so this week, man, and again, I just think it's important for people to, not to say this shit can be exhausting, not to say that you don't remain vigilant and all of that, but like, they just don't hit the fading couch and bedwetting every single time these people do something, because believe it or not, even though Kamala and all of them told you that a dictatorship was heading our way, like, there's just so much sprawl in the damn bureaucracy, bro. Especially these agencies where these people are like unelected and they know that like they're going to be there for 25 years and the president just gets 4. and they know they're gonna take, like, they could tie these people up in the courts forever. Like, bruh, this shit ain't gonna be easy for them. It ain't gonna be easy, even with their majorities in the House and the Senate, slim ass majorities, by the way. It's not gonna be easy for them to do what they want to do. And I think this week was another lesson in that. And I do think this week was another lesson that they're not wholly unconstrained. Um, they're not wholly just unattached from public sentiment and public pressure and media pressure. Like, they're not detached from that. This isn't some mythical fucking, regime. Like, they are subject to the same limitations. Now, I think they have a willingness to endure certain amounts of backlash. They have a stomach for it that it seems like Democrats just never have. So, and I think that works to their advantage. But the idea that they're just going to be able to come in here and just start doing whatever the fuck they want, like, folks need to disabuse themselves of that notion and wake up to what the reality is. And again, that's not to say, folks, we don't stay vigilant and all of that stuff, but I think it's just important to point that shit out. And it matters, even after a crazy week. I just thought it was quite comical, like, just because it's like, it's not hard to see some of their tactics. Like, Trump at his little press conference after the plane crash in DC said DEI messed it up, so, like, there's not, like, enough skill or something crazy like that. It was like the air traffic controller dudes were white homies. The pilots of both aircrafts were white. Like, I don't know I don't know what part of DEI white dudes come in. I don't know. Mind you, I'm not a DEI adherent. I think DEI is mostly bullshit, if I'm being real with you. I think DEI is just like trickle down economics of the left, or not the left, excuse me, of liberalism. Whereas this idea that, like, blacks, Latinos, gays, women in these very elite spaces get jobs, and somehow the benefits of their individual jobs are supposed to trickle down to the black masses. I think DEI is crap. It doesn't apply to janitors, doesn't apply to bus drivers, it doesn't apply to school teachers, it doesn't apply to, everyday people. And so DEI could go kick rocks for all I care. But the idea that this guy in his buffoonish ways, like, is going to be like, oh, DEI ruined this and made the planes crash, is just comical. But it's like, it's an insight into how these people plan on messaging to the public. And so, just another week, another topsy-turvy situation in the freaking Trump administration. Anyway, that's our show for today, guys. Shouts to my producer, John Gervais. Hey, woke bro, I was one of the first. Shouts to Jeff Berg to subscribe to Michael's channel. Also called into his show and roasted him about our acquisition of Kawhi. Shouts to you. Rest in peace, my brother Michael Brooks, who without him, a lot of this shit wouldn't be possible. So shouts to him. The legacy lives on. Left is best, y'all. Hashtag that. Anyway, shouts to my producer, John Gervais, on the ones and threes. Always keeping the trains running on time. Shouts to you guys for being locked in with us. We'll see you guys next week. Peace out, y'all.